This cylinder here, this is a little different. If you watched our section video on the mid lifts, the principles will be the same, but this is a little bit different. Got asked what this vise is. It's nothing special, but it's an awesome little vise. I think it's 4.5 inches, 5 inches. Rotates. It's set up for round stock and a standard vise. Pivots, obviously does what a vise does. It's I think we got it from Beaver. It was under $50 when we got it. For small little stuff on this little tiny bench and doing carburetors, the small stuff like this is perfect. I wouldn't go wailing on it with a big sledgehammer. It's not one of those vices, but for the money, it works. Again, when you're clamping these, you don't want to go too tight no matter what vise you got. You can damage a cylinder, you can squeeze it in, and then your seals will get messed up, your piston will get messed up on the inside, things won't work, bad things happen. I've seen 100 times they come in with vice marks on them, and the pistons wear seals right out because it's a little bit narrower, or they don't work at all, and then people try to tell you they didn't clamp it in a vise hard. Well, it just doesn't do that by itself. So as little pressure as you can do on this and still be able to do what you need to do. Well, this is where we'll use this style spanner wrenches come in handy. Get the one that fits your pins correctly. These sometimes will fight, sometimes they'll come off 1, 2, 3. You get into some bigger equipment, you literally have to stand on 4-foot pipe bars to get these off sometimes. It just depends on your equipment, what you're working on. These particular cylinders, most of the times they are not bad. You don't even usually have to put some kind of extension on here. Sometimes you do. I'm working on the opposite way I normally would, just to show you guys so you have a good camera view. Put your pin in. Most of the time the spacing's correct. It will kind of put the corner in the other hole, but not always. If it doesn't, as long as you've got a good bite here, you'll be alright. You can put pressure on it, you can hit it with a hammer, whatever you want to do. This one's going pretty nice. Sometimes you really got to work these. Again, there's an O-ring in here, so that's also making it a little tougher to just thread out. There we go. So this is an HH34 3-point hitch cylinder. You'll notice it's bigger than the other style. It's built more like your traditional commercial cylinders are, but rebuilding principles are very similar. Taking apart similar. Take your gland nut off here. Sometimes this can be a bugger. If they get real bad, and you gotta be careful, you can actually put an air fitting on here and push it out, but you got to be careful with your amount of air pressure and how you introduce it and where this is facing, because it can come out like a bullet. Sometimes these will fight, other times they come right out. Sometimes to the bar, all it takes. What you want to do if you plan on rebuilding these is to have this extended all the way out before you take it off, but it doesn't always happen that way. Well, you're going to have this piece of metal too I forgot about. Don't want to lose that. I wish the magnets on these little rubber jaws were better. They're handy as heck. They work great, but I wish the magnet was a little better. Sometimes you can pull this out or beat it out. I don't know if you noticed or not, but it did go a little bit. I just rigged up a hose to go to the bottom. I can't get this out without beating it real hard. Video purposes, just wanted to show you a trick that sometimes works. I just rigged this up with the correct fittings, and we're going to see. Always be mindful, this is going to come out of here. It could come out like a bullet. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. There we go. That was just a couple little bumps. That's all you need. If that compressor was set any higher, things that would come flying out of there like a bullet. I think the compressor was only 40, 50 pounds in it. Again, I just made the correct fittings, little hose. It usually doesn't take much. There's no pressure against it. You're just fighting these roll rings. Alright, well, these parts are coming apart, and that's it for in here. If your fittings are in rough shape, or your O-rings behind there are leaking, swap them out and change them. Most of the time, if they're not leaking, don't mess with them. This one's got some rust, but I don't think they were leaking. We're going to leave this. Again, if this was going on a show tractor or a customer, they wanted this media blasted, we'd media blast this and put on primer and paint. We paint all the cylinders before we ship them out anyways. It just depends if they're going on restorations. We charge extra for the sandblasting and the painting. If they're not, we just do a nice quick coat of paint so it's presentable and there's no extra charge. It's just right into the cost of having us rebuild your cylinder. So we're going to bring these over to the parts washer, clean them up real nice, and we'll be right back. If you watched our mid-lift and J26 rebuild cylinders, you'll notice it's the same principles, a few differences, but not a ton. Again, mindful of how things come apart, take pictures, do a video, that way you don't forget when you're putting it back together. Lay things out. So this is going to have, just like the other cylinder, it's going to have 2 backup rings and an O-ring. We don't reuse any of them, so we're going to pull them out. You can do one at a time, or you can do multiple, whatever you want to do, it doesn't matter, especially since you're not reusing them. Again, pay attention to how they came out. Backup ring with the dish side is up against the O-ring, always. This we can't forget. Now we're going to do the same thing. We've got the rod seal sitting here. This one's kind of hard and brittle. It might not come out nice because it's just going to keep puncturing holes, but maybe not. Get as far down and as deep down as you can before you try prying it. And if you can go all the way behind it like that, that's ideal. Now you'll notice I'm in the seal, so it may rip, it may not. Yeah, it ripped that time. But get far behind it, pull it, work it out. There you go. And then on this side, again, we're replacing these U-cups. But get behind it before you start pushing down too far. And keep working yourself down. Otherwise, you're going to fight everything like that. The O-ring came out of the U-cup, that's what that is. These U-cups got O-rings in them. These are a little more tricky to rebuild than the belly lifts and the HH34s. Again, we're not saving these. Always put new seals in, so however they come out. That'll give you a good example. This is what a U-cup is. There's an O-ring inside this cup, and the O-ring keeps pressure all directions, and it helps seal on the rod, and it helps keep this set in the housing. And sometimes these will come out, but you can just push them back in. Don't forget this guy. So take this guy off. Alright, before reassembling everything, take everything, clean it up real good again, even though we just cleaned it. Take the O-ring spoon, fold your rag a few times and get in these grooves. There's always stuff in there. Go both directions with it. That stuff will destroy your seals. Yep, see all that garbage and grime and dirt? Alright. Same thing on this side. Don't be afraid to shove that rag in there. Make sure it's good and clean. Alright, here's our HH34 kit. We rebuilt a few cylinders already on this today, so it's getting a little dirty. Like I said, take them out and line them up how everything came out so you know how it came out in the direction. Alright, we're going to match things up here. So the 2 backup rings, we obviously know where it goes. You got 2 O-rings here. One's going to go with these backup rings, the bigger one's going to go on here. Alright, we'll set these aside right now and we'll concentrate on putting these in. Alright. We'll do the top groove first, and then we'll do the U-cup down there. We'll use this tool again, it makes life easier. Just a little bit of lube on here, you don't need much. Sometimes it can be a little finicky to get on. This one's just slightly small for this job and another one's slightly big, but either one does work. I just choose to go with this one right now. You want to slide it under this main with your handles closed, essentially, down. It's hard to do and try to get you a camera angle, but there. Again, you want to hold this because it's going to want to flip on you as you turn this. And if your hands are greasy, it definitely makes it tougher. You want to fold into a funky little shape. And you drop that bad boy right in there. And then unfold this and work it out to that angle and that's how they go in. Work your thumb all the way through there and make sure they're seated. The tool makes the job way easier. Now we're going to do the one on the bottom. This one you can put a little bit of lube on. Again, just a little. We're going to install this with the U-cup. Your O-ring faces down, faces you as you're installing this. You need to make sure it gets into that groove. So the side you want up, you're installing, you put it towards the tool so the O-ring is facing in, because I'm going in like this. As you're opening this, it's going to want to roll, so you got to hold it. You'll see as I go, I'm trying to keep it centered in view for you. Fold it around and just go as far as you can, as far as you need to get it into the hole. So this one, because the bigger tool's got to go all the way. Then you're going to send it in the groove and evenly and slowly open this up. And because this tool's big, it might, oh, it'll do it okay. Sometimes you're just going to have to pull the tool out before you can open it, but this one allowed me to do it. You'll see this one kind of fought a little bit. Sometimes they pop right in, but usually if you just take your thumb and make sure this O-ring isn't walking out of the cup, which it's not, it'll pop right into place. And these bounce right back. They're pretty resilient that way. They just don't like being torn. But if they're good seals, they'll seal in nice. Take the back of your O-ring spoon and just gently seat this thing in where it belongs. And then take your finger and work it in there as best as you can, as hard as you can. And it's in there now. Don't forget your big O-ring. These threads will chew it up a little bit, so just give it a little lube. And it's going to need some lube when it's going in there. And the lube does also help seal to a degree. This I usually don't use any tools because this one's pretty big and pliable. Just kind of roll it down there, and if you're worried about the threads, you can just stick your spoon between the thread and the O-ring as you're rolling it in, like that, and just roll it in. And then now we're down to the piston. Clean this out really good. Again, these are dished, your backup rings, they're concave. The concave side always sits towards the O-ring. If you got two of them, the O-ring gets sandwiched. And then the flat sides sit against the flats. Lube it up. And you can use a tool or do it by hand. Just don't roll them. I kind of like to get them started straight like that. And then you want to flip it a little bit so it rolls in the direction you want it to. If you do it by hand without a tool. If you do a tool, then you just stick it in there. Make sure it didn't flip on you. Seat it back. Move up your O-ring. You can come from either direction with this. And again, you can use a tool if you got one. If you don't, just work it in with your fingers. I try not to stretch them any more than you have to, and the tool kind of allows you not to stretch them any more than you have to. We'll set the back, the pick here, and just give it somewhere to slide over. As you're not really stretching it at this point, you're just sliding it over. And seat that against your backup ring. Make sure it's all the way down because your other ring has to go in here. And then your last backup ring. And then your next backup ring, concave side to the O-ring. Apologize, it's probably hard to see some of this stuff, but that one rolled a bit on me. That's what you're trying to avoid. Or you just straighten it out like that. Just set your rings on the back side of your spoon here. Everything's seated nice. And then remember your spacer. Put your spacer in here. I don't think it really matters what direction it goes, honestly. Again, you just want to make sure we're clean with everything here before it goes in. Now again with this, we got these sharp threads, and even though they're recessed, they can catch. So I always just lube them up, and then we can use the ring compressors if you got them. If not, you can do this. The deal with these is in the ring compressors, you can get the ring compressor in there past the threads if you got the right ring compressor. Otherwise, they don't really do you much good. So if you got your ring compressor, use your ring compressor. You'll get it past the threads as far as you can. Send that in. Except that wasn't completely successful, but once it started, I was hoping that was going to go a little further, but it didn't. And set it in your vise or whatever you're using. Again, you don't want to go too crazy in the vise. You just need a pair of hands essentially. And the key with this is to get it going as straight as you can. Normally, if you just tap the center, if you get a little crooked, sometimes you may have to straighten one side out or the other. Just gently do it, pay attention. Hopefully you got most of it past the threads before it really wants to fight at all. Now we're getting into the tighter spot of the bore, and now it's in there. There is a fitting here. Usually this is smooth in here because it never gets messed around with, like unlike the other cylinders where the pin holds them. But always check that ahead of time. You'll see she's in there now. So this piece, lube the heck out of, top and bottom, and the metal in there, it can't hurt. A little bit around that O-ring. There we go. So I just had to clean up the top of that with the, must have been a little burr or something on there. It should pop on kind of like that. You shouldn't have to really beat on it. Once in a while you might have to. If it's on there straight, you can just kind of tap this last one. And if you want, don't beat the seal too bad, but the nice thing with the soft hammer is it keeps the seal centered and it from popping out if you're pushing on it that way. You see how that went in? Alright, make sure your O-ring's good on here. Now we're under the threads. Thread it as far as you can by hand. It's fine thread, so it may take a minute or 6. Again, when you're clamping this, just tight enough to do what you got to do, because you will damage the cylinder and then it's no good. Just tight enough to stop it from spinning. Once they hit this O-ring, they thread a little bit harder because you're working that O-ring in. But the O-ring is on top, so usually it kind of sits itself in the groove. But you'll feel the difference when you start threading up against the O-ring. And don't be afraid to tighten these. All right. Now she's pretty tight, but make sure she's tight. And this one will get cleaned up and go off the paint. At this point, we repaint them. This one's getting primed and painted, but normally when we rebuild them for customers, we just throw a quick coat of paint on them. You'll see the vise scratched it up a little bit. Not the end of the world, but that's why we put the rag in there. And then what you can do is either stick this back in the vise, and you just want to work your piston back and forth a few times before it gets under a load. That'll just work your lube back and forth before you get a load on it. It should go smooth. You're gonna have a little resistance because your seals are dry, and obviously they're fresh. But now the lube's in there pretty good. It'll work. You don't want to do it too many times because there's not a bunch of oil in there. Quick photo of a customer's cylinder they sent in for us. This isn't a restore paint job, just one of our quick regular paint jobs going out. That's what they look like. For more information on the tools used here, we have a little bit of an in-depth intro on our cylinder rebuild kit for the mid-lift. So watch that video if you want to know more about the tools we've had in this video and other videos for hydraulic cylinder repair. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to comment below. We really appreciate it all. Go to Ingersolltractors.com for these seal kits and many other seal kits, as well as all kinds of parts for Ingersoll garden tractors, Briggs & Stratton engines, Kohler engines, and Onan engines. Thanks for watching. See you next time.